Constantly tired, Byung-Chul Han reveals the dark side of positivity. Have you ever woken up exhausted, not physically but existentially? Like you've just slept 8 hours but your soul didn't rest. You brush your teeth, scroll through motivational quotes, drink your coffee and tell yourself, you got this. But deep down, you don't believe it. You're tired, not just from work or responsibilities, but from being, from the relentless effort of becoming the best version of yourself, from the constant pressure to be positive, productive and efficient. And here's the twist. The thing that's draining you might not be negativity. It might be positivity itself. That's exactly what the Korean-German philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues in his groundbreaking work, The Burnout Society. He says that in today's world, we are no longer oppressed by external forces telling us you must, but instead by an internal voice whispering you can, and that whisper is far more exhausting. Let's set the stage. In the past, people were subjected to discipline. Society had clear rules, restrictions and prohibitions. You were told what not to do, what was forbidden, what was sinful. But today that structure has collapsed. Now we live in a world of possibility, of choice, of freedom. You can do anything, be anything, work anywhere, build a brand, hustle, grind, optimize. And on the surface, that sounds like liberation. But Han says it's actually a new form of control, one that disguises itself as empowerment. Because when no one is forcing you and you still feel compelled to overwork, to self-improve, to chase goals endlessly, who's the master now?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the paradox. We don't live in a disciplinary society anymore. We live in an achievement society. And that shift changes everything. The enemy is no longer the external authority figure, it's ourselves. We bully ourselves with productivity. We shame ourselves for resting. We turn every moment into a potential project. Even our hobbies become side hustles. Even our time off becomes curated content. And the result? We're constantly tired, not just in body but in spirit. Because we've internalized the system, we've become our own taskmasters. Han calls this the tyranny of positivity. And it's subtle. You don't feel it as a whip. You feel it as a warm, encouraging voice. Come on, you can do more. Don't give up now. Maximize your potential. It's the language of self-help, of hustle culture, of startup mantras and life coaches. But beneath the surface, it creates a deep fatigue. Because when everything becomes a task, nothing feels sacred. When every moment is a chance to optimize, you're never allowed to just be. And slowly, without even noticing, we lose the capacity for stillness, for reflection, for genuine leisure. We become machines pretending to be human. So let me ask you something real. When was the last time you did something just for the sake of doing it? Not for productivity, not for self-improvement, not for content, just for joy. If you're struggling to answer that, you're not alone. Most of us have forgotten what that even feels like. We've been conditioned to treat every moment like an investment. And in doing so, we've traded presence for performance. Life becomes a series of checkboxes, books to read, podcasts to consume, workouts to complete, affirmations to recite, and all of it is wrapped in a smiling face of positivity. But what happens when that face cracks? Byung-Chul Han offers a radical reframe. Maybe the solution to our exhaustion isn't more motivation, maybe it's less. Less striving, less optimizing, less pressure to become. Maybe returning to ourselves means withdrawing from the performance, not to escape life, but to re-enter it fully. Because the burnout we feel isn't just physical, it's existential. It's a result of being constantly exposed to the demand to be more. It's not our failures that exhaust us, it's our endless attempts to succeed at being endlessly better. And here's the most haunting part. Positivity has become the new mask. It hides the suffering we're not allowed to show. It tells us to smile through the pain, to manifest good vibes, to stay grateful even when we're falling apart. But Han says that this constant self-exploitation eventually leads to collapse, not just individually but culturally. Because when everyone is pretending to be okay, no one feels safe enough to be real. And without realness, there's no rest. Without vulnerability, there's no healing. So what if the answer isn't to keep pushing? What if the answer is to pause? To confront the silence we've been drowning out with productivity and positivity? What if rest isn't laziness, but rebellion? What if doing nothing is the most radical act in a world addicted to doing everything? My rest feels illegal, the hidden violence of endless self-optimization. There's something deeply unsettling about how guilty we feel when we rest, not just the occasional guilt of skipping a workout or procrastinating on a task, but a deeper, almost moral unease, like we're violating some unspoken law when we simply exist without producing, without striving, without contributing to some measurable outcome. And this is exactly what Byung-Chul Han exposes in his critique of modern life. Rest no longer belongs to us, it's been colonized by the logic of performance. Rest has become suspicious, almost taboo. In a culture of constant optimization, stopping feels like failure. But here's the disturbing truth. This is not a personal flaw, it's a systemic condition. We are trained to feel this way, conditioned to run even when no one is chasing us. Han argues that the violence of our time is no longer visible. It's not loud, it doesn't come with chains or threats. It comes softly, through metrics, through goals, through apps that track our steps, our sleep, our focus. It comes through likes, followers, deadlines, KPIs. It comes through the invisible pressure to always be improving. And because this pressure feels internal, we blame ourselves. We feel inadequate, inefficient, tired, and then we feel ashamed for feeling that way. But the real violence is structural. It's the system whispering in our ear, "You're not enough, but you could be if you just did more." And that whisper never stops. Think about how we talk about rest. We don't say, "I'm resting because I'm human." We say, "I earned this rest," as if rest is a reward, as if it must be justified by previous labor. This language reveals everything. In a truly humane society, rest would be a right, a rhythm, a built-in part of existence. But in our achievement-driven culture, rest is suspicious unless it's framed as recovery for more work. Even our vacations are structured. Our weekends are filled with productivity hacks and self-care routines that mimic the very performance we're trying to escape. This is what Han means when he talks about the violence of positivity. It's not that positivity is bad in itself, it's that positivity has become a weapon. It silences dissent, it hides burnout, it turns every breakdown into a growth opportunity. We are fed slogans like "everything happens for a reason" and "failure is just feedback." Not because they're always true, but because they keep us running, they keep us producing, they keep us on the treadmill. And when we collapse, we're told to meditate, to journal, to manifest better outcomes, never to actually stop, never to question the game itself. So I'm going to ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you truly rested, without guilt, without scrolling through your phone, without planning your next move, without thinking about how you are going to explain that rest to someone else? If it's been a while, then you're not alone. This is how deep the performance runs. We don't just relax, we document it, and in doing so, we stay trapped in the very cycle that exhausts us. Han's brilliance lies in showing us that what we call freedom today is often just a more subtle form of coercion. You're free to rest, of course, but only if it makes you more productive tomorrow. You're free to follow your passion, but only if it generates income. You're free to be yourself, but only if that self aligns with the values of hustle, growth, and visibility. And this is why so many of us are tired, not just from doing too much, but from being unable to stop, from carrying the weight of constant self-management, from living in a society where even our inner life has become a project. But what if rest didn't need a reason? What if you could just stop, not because you've earned it, but because stopping is part of being alive? What if you could sit in silence without trying to turn it into insight? What if you could nap without calling it recovery? What if you could be still without feeling like time is being wasted? This is not detachment. This is not giving up. This is resistance. Because in a world that demands your constant self-optimization, choosing to rest becomes an act of rebellion. Choosing to be unproductive, unapologetically, becomes a way of reclaiming your humanity. Exhaustion is the new normal, how we became slaves to our own potential. There's a strange phenomenon happening all around us, a quiet epidemic that we've normalized to the point where we can barely recognize it anymore. Everyone is tired. Not just tired in the way a person feels after a long day, but weary in a way that seems to seep into the soul. It's a chronic, low-grade exhaustion that lingers beneath even the most energetic smiles. And the most disturbing part? It's not seen as a problem. It's seen as a sign of commitment, a badge of honor, a reflection of how seriously we take life, our goals, our growth. In the achievement society, exhaustion has become proof that we're doing it right, that we're living up to our potential. Byung-Chul Han calls this the exhaustion of the self, and it's crucial to understand that this kind of fatigue isn't caused by an external oppressor. No one is shouting at us to perform. No one is holding a whip. Instead, we have internalized the demand to be excellent. The voice that drives us is our own. I could be more. I should be better. I can't stop now. These aren't commands from a boss. They're whispers from within. We've absorbed the logic of productivity so deeply that it's become our identity. And so we grind ourselves down, not out of fear, but out of ambition. Not because someone else is forcing us, but because we've learned to force ourselves. We are no longer subjects being dominated, we are now projects to be optimized. Every part of our lives becomes a task, our bodies, our relationships, our minds, even our emotions. We track our sleep, our steps, our focus, our feelings. We analyze our habits, upgrade our routines, digitize our existence. But in doing so, we split ourselves into two, the part that lives and the part that manages the living. And this split creates an unbearable tension, because we're never just being. We're always observing, correcting, controlling. We're always trying to become something more than what we are. It's no wonder we're exhausted. We've turned potential into a prison. The idea that you can be anything sounds empowering, but it carries a hidden curse. You are never enough as you are. There is always some new horizon, some skill to acquire, some flaw to correct. And unlike past societies, where people were oppressed by external rulers or rigid traditions, we now rule ourselves. We are both tyrant and victim. We exploit ourselves in the name of becoming better, and when we collapse, we don't blame the system. We blame ourselves for not being strong enough, disciplined enough, focused enough. So I want to ask you, when did exhaustion become the measure of our worth? Why do we equate being tired with being meaningful? It's because we've lost touch with what it means to be human outside of utility. We don't know how to value ourselves unless we're producing something, and that's the tragedy. We've mistaken performance for presence. We've confused achievement with aliveness. The more we chase our potential, the further we drift from our essence. Han invites us to reconsider this entire framework. What if potential isn't something to be extracted, but something to be lived? What if you don't need to keep optimizing yourself to be worthy? What if the constant pursuit of becoming is exactly what's keeping you from being? We've made a God out of possibility, but that God is never satisfied. It always demands more, and no matter how much we give, it whispers, "You could still do better." This isn't a call to laziness, it's a call to sanity. You are not a startup, you are not a brand, you are not a machine, you are a person. And people need rest, people need slowness, people need unstructured time, not because it leads to greater productivity, but because it reminds us that we are more than what we produce. So maybe the real revolution isn't in doing more, maybe it's in doing less. Maybe it's saying no to the endless pressure to self-op. Maybe it's choosing to be tired and not making that mean you're broken. Maybe it's no longer trying to live up to your potential, but instead allowing yourself to live at all. The courage to be useless, reclaiming your life from the algorithm of achievement. There's a certain kind of bravery no one talks about anymore, the bravery to be useless. Not useless in the sense of giving up on life or being lazy or lacking ambition, but useless in the deeper, more radical sense. Being free from the demand to be useful to a system that never stops taking. In a world governed by algorithms, metrics, and endless self-measurement, usefulness has become the highest virtue. We are constantly evaluated by our output, our engagement, our growth, and yet, when everything is useful, nothing feels sacred, nothing feels truly ours. That's why Byung-Chul Han urges us to rediscover the courage to be useless, not as a retreat from life, but as a return to it. We've been tricked into believing that value is externally determined, that who we are must be validated by our productivity, our visibility, our efficiency. This is why so many of us feel estranged from ourselves. We're always performing, always selling some version of who we think we need to be. But what would it mean to live a life that doesn't need to be justified? What would it mean to do something with no purpose, no audience, no result, just because it brings you alive? That's the courage Han is talking about. The courage to step outside the algorithm. The courage to reclaim your life from the logic of capitalism, even if just for a moment.